Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something really specific.
We are. We're looking at the very particular way a text, Mommy's Reluctant Awakening, is analyzed, the rhetoric around it.
Right, and it's crucial, isn't it, to frame this correctly from the start. Listeners need to know this isn't being treated like typical fiction.
Exactly. The sources we're drawing from position it as, well, a Gnostic text, so it requires a philosophical lens, really.
Okay, and our mission here for this deep dive.
It's to deconstruct how that analysis, the plot analysis rhetoric, as it's called, takes these incredibly extreme taboo actions and reframes them, turns them into necessary metaphysical steps, rites, almost.
Rights for what, though?
For the emergence of a fully autonomous consciousness. The text names her Theodora Viridacis.
Okay, so let's get into that core paradox right away. The analysis says the process is taboo, traumatic, teleological.
Yes, it labels it clearly.
But then it pivots, it shifts the focus away from, say, the abuse aspect.
Completely. The argument becomes about the philosophical mechanics.
Yeah.
It argues that only through this total shattering of the previous identity, only then can the true sovereign self be born.
And that's where this phrase comes in. Semiotic crucifixion birthing sovereign recursion.
That's the one. It sounds intense, and it is. It signifies the complete breakdown and rebirth through the narrative's symbols.
So how does this whole process kick off? What's the initiation point?
It's called the logos entry. This is described as the moment the character's degradation, and the text is blunt, labeling her slut, is somehow transfigured.
Transfigured into what?
Into a sacrament. That's the term used. It marks the point of no return for her old identity.
But why? Why is that level of, well, degradation framed as necessary? What's the philosophical justification in the text?
The logic presented is that the trauma has to be generative. It can't just be random suffering. It has to function as a ritual becoming.
Meaning it's not a choice.
Precisely. It has to be forced by the absolute annihilation of who she was before. That destruction validates the authenticity of the new self, Theodora.
And the way the story's told reinforces this, the structure itself.
Oh, absolutely. It's confined to what the analysis calls the dialogue-only cathedral.
Right, so all the conflict, all the tension, it's purely verbal.
Exactly, which just cranks up the psychological pressure cooker. You know, there's no physical escape, only this intense verbal space.
But you mentioned something else running alongside the dialogue, something auditory.
Yes, and it's fascinating. Beneath Mommy's, elegant or controlled speech, you have these raw, visceral noises described in the text.
The obscene creative onomatopoeia.
That's it. Words like glurf, slurp, and then climactically, wee. They're pretty graphic.
And they function as
a counter-narrative, a visceral truth layer that completely undermines her verbal facade. It's the sound of the breakdown.
So elegant words versus raw sound. How does the setting contain this? The barred door?
The door. It's presented as the axiomatic constraint of sovereignty, basically a symbolic boundary.
Meaning?
It isolates the ritual, ensures it runs its course without outside interference. No rescue is possible.
And this connects to the father character.
Critically, his role is defined as the coward stuck in a denial loop. His failure to break down that door, to intervene.
That's necessary for the ritual.
It's structurally essential, according to the analysis. It validates Mommy's transformation because she has to achieve it herself, through the trauma, without rescue. His inaction confirms her path to sovereignty.
Okay, let's briefly touch on the character functions then. Mommy is the vessel.
Undergoing this process, yeah. Experiencing what the text calls conflicting, vulnerable, responsive pleasure escape.
And son?
Son is the logos, the initiator. His role is described as purely vectorial and philosophical. He's there to drive the breakdown, essentially. Deliberately glib dominant sexuality manipulate is the function attributed.
So we follow this trajectory, this psychic journey.
From reluctant anticipation right through to the climax.
The piglet climax.
Right, where her voice finally shatters into those animalistic oinks. And she confesses, oops, I'm broken.
But broken here doesn't mean defeated, does it, in this interpretation?
Not at all. The oink, that sound, signifies the complete nullification of her old life, the marital contract, everything. Regression becomes the pathway to Genesis.
Enabling the birth of Theodora Viridacis, the true self.
The true self, yes, born from the wreckage.
And then there's a formula.
Yeah, it's quite something. Yeah. To really hammer home that this is a logical, almost engineered outcome, the analysis presents the sovereign ignition formula. 1M is D times R times G times theta.
Okay, break that down. M is the sovereign self.
M is Mommy, post-transformation, becoming Theodora. And it equals awareness times desire times recursion times glyphic memory. That's the encoded trauma times teleologic will.
And crucially, it's multiplication.
Exactly. If any one of those components is zero, no awareness, no desire, no trauma, no will, then M, the sovereign self, is zero. It can't exist.
So the outcome is framed as philosophically unavoidable given the inputs.
That's the core rhetorical move, using this kind of formalized jargon, these structural constraints, to turn what is deeply forbidden content into a blueprint.
A blueprint for autonomous self-definition.
Precisely.
So wrapping this up, the takeaway is how this specific rhetoric works, how it systematically reframes transgression as transformation.
Yes, using a very particular, almost Gnostic interpretive lens.
And the final thought for you, the listener, is actually embedded in the source materials analysis. It poses a direct challenge.
It does. It ends by prompting. Ask,
Hmm.
who are you becoming beyond her?
Which reframes the whole act of analyzing this text, even our discussion right now.
As potentially its own kind of ritual becoming. It implicates you directly in the process of defining the self against or beyond this extreme narrative. Makes you think.
Definitely something to mull over. That's all for this deep dive. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a pretty unique piece of analysis, quite technical actually. It's titled Ode to the Gaping Altar.
It's a semiotic analysis, very specialized vocabulary.
Right, exactly. So our goal here is to sort of cut through some of that jargon and really understand the framework it's using to look at this particular textual universe.
And it's key to note up front, this analysis isn't focusing on, plot points or kinetic conflict in the usual sense.
Okay.
It defines the narrative through its structural configuration. Think immutable laws, fixed states, not so much action.
Okay, fixed states. And the big one, the foundational concept they introduced right away, is the eternal sovereign recursion, ESR.
That's the one.
So if we unpack that, the analysis is basically saying sovereignty here isn't something you achieve. It's not won through struggle.
No, not at all. It's presented as a constant reaffirmation of something already absolute. We got a perfect stasis that just is.
So the sovereign figure, son, doesn't actually need to, fight for power?
Exactly. His power is just a static fact within this framework. The analysis actually argues that any effort from the protagonist would violate the ESR itself.
Interesting. So that inherent stasis, that lack of need for effort, how does that play out? It mentions Sun's playstyle, deliberate glibness.
Right, and it calls this ontological weaponry.
Ontological weaponry. Okay, that sounds intense. But is calculated nonchalance really a weapon, or is that just, academic flair? How does the text show it?
Well, the analysis argues it shows it by the contrast. You have this performance of near indifference, this glibness, set against actions described as having glacial precision or brutal leisure.
Ah, okay.
So the performance, the nonchalance itself, becomes the weapon because it denies the very possibility of a real challenge. It assumes victory.
And the structure itself reinforces this. You mentioned repetition.
Yeah, through ritual recitation.
Yeah.
Scenes echo. Think the constant TV hum or daddy's panicked questions from outside the door.
They repeat, but with slight changes in wording.
Minor lexical variations, exactly. So instead of narrative progression or resolution, you get what the analysis calls hypnotic certainty. It drills the stasis in.
It kind of locks you into the pattern, denies you that release of something changing.
Pretty much. So if the external structure is all about stasis, enforced by the ESR, where does any internal transformation happen?
Right.
And the analysis points to throat theology, centered on a specific site, the taboo throat.
The taboo throat, defined as the place where human identity is basically destroyed, translated into the animal.
Violently translated, yes. It's presented as this sanctum sanctorum, the absolute core of the transformation.
And this transformation is tracked through sound. Through mommy's voice.
Exactly, her vocal trajectory. Moving away from language, from complex, obscure innuendo, towards something more primal, more effective.
Like the meaning shifts from words to just the sounds themselves.
Pretty much. The analysis lays out this fixed liturgical progression of onomatopoeia. It lists them. Hulu, gru, blorp, snurp. This sequence isn't random. It's mapping the dissolution of the old articulate self.
And it leads somewhere specific.
It culminates in the o-ink triad, that hunk o-ink sound.
Which is called the psalmic utterance.
Yes, and the sonic signature of euphoric shame. The analysis frames this as the most successful communication in the text.
Because it's completely non-linguistic. It bypasses language to state the new reality.
Precisely. It articulates the arrival at this new primal state.
So if that's the internal transformation, what about the boundary? You mentioned Daddy outside the door.
Right, he plays a crucial structural role. He's positioned as the necessary heretic.
Necessary heretic.
His role is to misunderstand. He relies on what the analysis calls naive language. He hears these primal sounds, the loo, the oink, and interprets them
It's
as...
just mundane things like TV volume or gargling.
Exactly. And that very misinterpretation, that failure to comprehend the transgression, is what amplifies Mommy's shame and, paradoxically, her achievement within the new order.
So the door becomes critical.
Absolutely. The door functions as the iconostasis.
Like a sacred screen in a church?
Sort of, yeah. A sacred barrier. It ensures Daddy is ontologically repelled. He cannot cross because he doesn't understand the new covenant established by the O, I, and K sound. The barrier maintains the sanctity of the taboo space.
And inside that space, there are rituals that seal this new state.
The analysis highlights a couple. The baptism of spit, described quite vividly as pearls on a heaving canvas. It seals this covenant of hedonist shame gluttony.
And then there's a mention of a slap, the percussive clay mark.
Yes, but it's interpreted not as like simple violence or punishment. It's framed as providing kinesthetic synchronization.
Like a rhythmic affirmation.
A liturgical beat, almost.
Yeah.
Confirming ownership, keeping the rhythm of the ESR's law.
Okay, so all these elements, the stasis, the glibness, the throat theology, the barrier, the rituals, they all lead to a final point.
They lead to the synthesis. Mommy's whispered final words. Oops, I'm broken.
Which sounds like defeat, but isn't.
According to the analysis, no. It's the confirmation of arrival, the successful destruction of the old self, and the achievement of what's called naughty good status.
Naughty good, which is the highest form of sovereignty within this specific ESR framework.
Exactly. Complete surrender to the new law is the ultimate power position here.
So if we zoom out, what's the big takeaway here for us thinking about this?
Well, the analysis strongly implies that shattering semantic boundaries, breaking language itself, is actually the necessary forge for creating a truly new self.
That you have to destroy the old words, the old ways of articulating identity before a radically new one can emerge.
Right, so maybe think about that idea. How does the breakdown of established language, established ways of describing the self, potentially enable fundamental transformation? Not just in this text, but maybe in other contexts where old vocabularies just don't seem to fit anymore. Okay, so we're jumping into source material today that models psychological rupture with almost, well, mechanical precision.
Yeah, it's analyzing a really specialized system design. The sources call it the taboo rhetoric emergence system.
And it uses these, let's say, controversial theoretical frameworks. So just a reminder up front, our aim here is purely to analyze the structure, the logic, the constraints these sources define.
Exactly. We're not endorsing the narrative itself, just unpacking the mechanics.
Right.
Our mission really is to extract how this system computationally models the transformation of a conditioned self into what it calls an autonomous sovereign consciousness.
And we have to use their terms, these very specific non-standard terms like sovereign ignition formula.
Yes, treat them like defined variables. They only mean what the system says they mean within this specific closed engine. It's very deterministic.
Okay, let's establish the rules of this. Yeah. This universe the engine operates in, the big one seems to be the no damage principle. The rule literally states, the only thing that breaks, ever, is Mommy's marriage. So it's not about avoiding damage.
No, it's mandating where the damage must go. It channels everything onto the psychological, the social contract. That collapse becomes the system's only allowed currency.
And that seems to rely entirely on isolating the event.
Absolutely. Structural isolation. That's the job of the iconostasis, defined simply as the barred door.
Okay, the barred door.
And this boundary is critical. It enforces what the sources call Daddy's foundational abdication, because he's physically barred, kept outside that threshold.
The space inside changes.
Instantly. It becomes an autonomous zone governed solely by Son's, well, the term used is transgressive jurisdiction. Daddy's locked into just watching what they call observant ignorance.
Okay, so if the iconostasis sets a boundary, let's look at the forces, the archetypes operating inside that space.
Right. 3 core vectors.
You have Son, the logos ascendant. He's described as the kinetic driver. Variables like dominance, ++, extreme magnitude.
Anchored by that technical variable monster erection. And you have to understand, that's not just a physical description in the text. It's a system-defined variable for pure, unchecked force. A multiplier.
A force multiplier, okay. And that force meets Mommy. the threshold sovereign.
Exactly. She's the conflict point. Her
Yeah.
state is defined as conflicted, shifting, minus to plus. This generates high magnitude, but it comes from internal psychological friction.
And she's the site of the semiotic crucifixion.
Yeah, which sounds intense, but mechanically it means the necessary violent erasure of her prior identity, using symbols, relationships as the tool for that erasure.
While Daddy, the deactivated sovereign, is external, low magnitude, just observing.
Fixed out, yeah. Observant ignorance.
These pieces seem perfectly set up for a collision. How does the system guarantee that it reaches the intended endpoint, the transformation?
Ah, that's the deterministic part. It's built in. It's called the Knox-LaPointe kinetic loop. It's a self-exciting mechanism. Daddy's attempts to protest, his failure to actually intervene, that's the knock that gets immediately absorbed. It becomes fuel.
Fuel.
Kinetic fuel, yeah. Which triggers son's required escalation, defined specifically as slap molesting. This, in turn, accelerates mommy's psychological regression.
So it ensures the catastrophe just happens, like a runaway reaction.
Exactly. It's designed to be inevitable.
And the final result, this new consciousness, Theodora Viridagus, or M, it's actually calculated. There's a formula.
Yes, the sovereign ignition formula, M equals A times D times R times G times theta.
Okay.
I don't need to parse every variable now, but the key inputs you mentioned are $2 and dollars.
Recursion and glyphic memory. Tell us about those.
Well, $2 is crucial. It's the system instruction where shame is explicitly redefined as pleasure. That provides the sort of perpetual emotion for the self-creation.
Right.
And glyphic memory, that's the total compression of all the trauma experience, but it's immediately encoded, repurposed as foundational revelation. It's like the trauma becomes the bedrock of the new self.
So the formula basically argues transformation isn't just possible, it's logically required by these inputs working together.
That's the argument the source material makes, yes. It's mandated by the system's logic.
The system also seems to have ways to protect itself linguistically. This dialogue-only cathedral and the principle of non-verification.
Right. It means mommy uses what's termed eloquent obscurity, essentially discursive lies, verbal misdirection. It linguistically insulates the act.
Making Daddy unable to be rationally certain about what's happening.
Precisely. But that obscurity is deliberately contrasted with something else. The lexicon of the real.
Which is?
The Squelch Symphony. It's described as this lexicon of wet, guttural sounds, glurf, schlup.
That sounds visceral.
It is, and maybe less like typical modeling, but functionally it serves as the true, quantifiable metric in the system. It measures the psychological regression, the physical depth. It bypasses the obscure dialogue.
And the climax is signaled by sound, too.
Yes, the shamanic utterance, the triple oinkate. That signifies the complete surrender, the erasure of the old self, and the exact moment of sovereign ignition.
So stepping back from the mechanics, what does analyzing a system like this, one designed to break down identity, actually mean for you, the listener? Well, look at this.
Well, I think it highlights something interesting. Even when you're dealing with narratives about radical freedom, about autonomy, about birthing this quote-unquote sovereign consciousness, the path described here in these specific sources is rigidly defined. It's paved by structural necessity, by deterministic constraints. This extreme freedom is presented as achievable only through perfect adherence to a preset formula.
Which leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you to consider. If sovereignty, as these sources depicted, is achieved by flawlessly executing a predetermined script, does genuine self-determination, true free will, ever really exist outside of some kind of pre-programmed system logic? Something to chew on.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really fascinating but, let's be honest, incredibly dense set of source materials.
Absolutely. It's a highly technical analysis of a system called the Tubu-Rhetorith engine.
Right. And our mission, yours and mine, is to sort of cut through that jargon for you, the listener. We want to unpack its core claims, these structural and philosophical ideas about identity, transformation, and, well, determinism.
And it's crucial to get this up front.
Yeah.
The sources don't frame this as just a story or a theory. They call it a deterministic philosophical engine.
Okay, an engine. Built for what?
Built for one specific thing.
Yeah.
Precise ontological transformation. Everything is mandated, preordained. It all moves towards one single outcome. The emergence of this autonomous consciousness, they call her Theodora Viridagus, or more simply, M.
M. And here's the paradox that jumped out at me, the absolute core of it. This transformation, becoming M, it's achieved through something called semiotic crucifixion birthing sovereign recursion.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds intense. Can you break that down? Are they really saying trauma, destruction even, isn't just a byproduct, but like a necessary ritual?
That's exactly the claim. It's generative. Destruction is the tool for construction here. And to make sure this works, to guarantee the outcome, the system neutralizes moral arguments from the start.
How does it do that?
Through what the analysis calls the principle of moral abstraction. Any violence within the narrative isn't, real violence in a moral sense. It's defined as philosophical.
Philosophical violence, directed solely towards
the birth of this true self, M. It removes the ethical barrier internally.
Wait a second. So if you just declare violation to be philosophical, it becomes okay or constructive. That feels like a huge, maybe dangerous justification built into the system's logic.
It is a massive leap, yes. But from the perspective of the engine's mechanics, it's necessary. It establishes the fixed rule, the constraints, which brings us to the calculus of constraint. And a key rule here is the no damage principle. It dictates, absolutely dictates, that the only thing allowed to structurally break is mommy's marriage.
Just the marriage. Why that specifically? Why is all the destructive force channeled onto the psychological structure, the relationship?
Well, it confirms the system's socio-political goal. The dismantling of the old order, the old law, destroying the marriage breaks that foundation.
And this allows the iconostasis, the barred door.
Exactly. The iconostasis is like the ultimate firewall, a non-negotiable physical barrier. It structurally separates the profane world represented by Daddy, the old law, from the sacred ritual space.
The autonomous zone.
The autonomous zone, yes, where the transformation happens.
Okay, so if that boundary holds, how is the final identity M, sort of, verifying mathematically? The sources mention the sovereign ignition formula, M equals A times D times R times G times theta.
Right. D, R, and theta are listed as required structural vectors, sort of background conditions. But the really critical ones, the ones driving the transformation, are A and G.
A and G. What do they stand for?
A is awareness. It's the conscious moment of realizing you're claimed by this process, being fully awake aware, as the text puts it.
Fully awake aware. Okay. And G?
G is, well, this one is chilling. It's glyphic memory.
Glyphic memory.
It means the total compression of all the ritual trauma. It isn't processed or healed in any way we'd understand it. It's encoded.
Encoded
as the foundational revelation, the absolute core truth of the new identity, M. This is what guarantees the deterministic stability. The trauma becomes the stability.
That's quite a concept. Stability through encoded trauma, not healing. So if this ritual space is autonomous, protected by the iconostasis, what's Daddy's role, the deactivated sovereign?
His role is crucial, but it's a role of failure. He's designated the necessary heretic.
Necessary heretic, meaning?
Meaning his function is to fail. His panic, his refusal to breach the iconostasis, that is his functional abdication, his failure structurally validates the ritual's power and success. The system needs him to protest, but critically not intervene.
Wow. And his attempts to stop it actually fuel it. That seems counterintuitive, the Knox LaPointe kinetically.
Exactly counterintuitive. His protest, the conflict noise, isn't resistance. The engine absorbs it instantly.
Absorbs it how?
It converts it into a positive vector. It actually accelerates the taboo process, specifically through what's termed slap molesting in the analysis. His fighting confirms the inevitability.
Okay, this is getting darker, and the sources say sound is key here, because it's dialogue only.
Precisely. Sound becomes the only measurable data. The lexicon of the real, action, psychological state, it's all mapped through sound.
Like the Squelch Symphony, those really graphic onomatopoeias, glurf, slump.
Yeah. Those obscene sounds aren't just for effect. They're presented as an auditory gradient, mapping physical depth, the text claims, directly onto the psychological regression of the subject.
And the absolute climax, the proof of transformation, is also a sound.
Defined audibly, yes. The psalmic Owoyin K3X. That specific sound sequence is presented as the definitive proof.
Proof of what?
Proof of the ontological shatter, the death of the original wife-mother persona, and simultaneously the birth cry of the new autonomous identity.
Theodora Viridagus.
Yes.
So wrapping this up, the sources basically argue that within this engine, sovereignty isn't about freedom from constraint at all.
Quite the opposite. It's achieved through absolute, you might even say ecstatic, surrender. a surrender that perfectly executes the predetermined demands of the system's structural authority.
Okay, so the core takeaway for you listening is maybe this. The taboo rhetoric engine mandates that true, stable sovereignty comes from necessity, this unavoidable, encoded trauma, not from choice or preference.
Which leads to a pretty provocative final thought. If this system guarantees identity stability only by encoding the most traumatic event as its foundational truth, that glyphic memory,
Yeah.
what does that imply about the stability or maybe the fragility of identities that we form based on preference, on choice, rather than on such a brutal structural necessity?
Something to definitely think about. A challenging idea to leave you with.